Good morning, sixth grade. If you have not completed this video yet, or this do now yet, make sure you do it right now. Unpause when you're done. Okay, so yesterday we read the exposition in Lamb to the Slaughter, and then it talks about characters and setting. So go ahead and check those things off. Make sure you have those too. So there were some problems in our expositions from yesterday I want to make sure we address right now. We're going to play a game called What's Wrong with This Exposition? Someone put 1. I am just sitting at home, reading the newspaper and watching TV. Why could that not be included in your narrative from yesterday? Actually, there's not really space for it, so just kind of jot down right here. Imagine that I put a little line right here. And then unpause. Okay, yeah, so this would work because this is a detail that couldn't have taken place in Mesopotamia. So remember, this took place in like 3500 BCE. So make sure that you would say, doesn't make sense in time period. Make sure that you today go ahead and proofread your story and make sure that all of the things that you have in it would actually take place in ancient Sumer. So go ahead and jot down an idea of what could this writer say instead. Okay, now number 2. I took some fresh vegetables out of the refrigerator. Go ahead and jot down why that doesn't make sense, and then what could this writer say instead? Unpause when you're done. Good. So what this writer could have said instead, I mean, you don't have to totally change the details, but I would think it'd be great to have something here about like, oh, I took some fresh vegetables from the crops I grew outside in my fertile soil. And then an example for this one would be, I was reading something off of a clay tablet written with a stylus in cuneiform, something that shows you're including details. Then a huge shout out. I am just getting home from inventing the wheel, walking in the hot weather. It was not fun. It was so hot outside I could cook a turtle and have it for dinner. I just love this detail about setting from the exposition, so shout out to Brandon Thomas. Our objective. I can identify details that contribute to the rising action in Lamb to the Slaughter, and I can create a rising action in my ancient Sumer narrative. So we're going to read what does Roald Dahl do so well in his Lambs to the Slaughter rising action we're about to read, and then learn from him to make sure we do the same thing in the rising action that we're going to continue in our ancient Sumer narrative. So flip the page. Remember, the rising action is a bunch of little actions that lead to the climax. So whatever happens in your rising action has to be a bunch of little details that lead us to this. It should be dramatic and build suspense. So you want to get your reader thinking, wow, what is going to happen next? What is going to be this big emotional action in the climax? Follow along while I read the rising action of Lamb to the Slaughter. I put a little bit of the exposition here for where we let off. When the clock said 10 minutes to 5, she began to listen. And a few moments later, punctually as always, she heard the car tires on the stones outside. The car door closing, footsteps passing the window, the key turning in the lock. She stood up and went forward to kiss him as he entered. So again, this is actually where our rising action starts. So go ahead and underline where it says she stood up and then put rising action next to it because this is where we see the actual rising action start because it is the first action. So now everything from here on is going to be a slow build up to the climax. Hello, darling, she said. Hello, he answered. She took his coat and hung it up. Then she made the drinks, a strong one for him and a weak one for herself, and soon she was back again in her chair with the sewing, and he was in the other chair, holding the tall glass, rolling it gently so that the ice knocked musically against the side of the glass. For her, this was always a wonderful time of day. So now stop and jot. How do you infer Mary Maloney feels towards her husband? And underline evidence that supports your answer. Do you think that she hates him? Do you think she loves him? Do you think they have an awkward marriage? How do you think Mary feels towards him? Underline evidence. Pause the video, unpause when you're done. Okay, welcome back. Let's keep reading. She knew he didn't want to speak much until the first drink was finished, and she was satisfied to sit quietly, enjoying his company after the long hours alone in the house. She loved the warmth that came out of him when they were alone together. She loved the shape of his mouth, and she especially liked the way he didn't complain about being tired. Tired, darling? Yes, he sighed. I'm thoroughly exhausted. And as he spoke, he did an unusual thing. He lifted his glass and drank it down in one swallow, although there was still half of it left. He got up and went slowly to get himself another drink. "I'll get it," she cried, jumping up. "Sit down," he said. When he came back, she noticed that the new drink was a very strong one, so he's drinking a lot of alcohol right now. She watched him as he began to drink. So let's stop and jot. Analyze these few paragraphs above. What do Mary's husband's actions imply about his feelings towards her? So imply is kind of like, what do they teach us? So our author doesn't tell us here how Mary's husband feels about her, but if we take a look at his actions, we can figure out what our author is telling us. So stop and jot your answer to that. What do Mary's husband's actions imply about his feelings towards her? And pause when you're done. "I think it's a shame," she said, "that when someone's been a policeman as long as you have, he still has to walk around all day long." He didn't answer. "Darling," she said, "if you're too tired to eat out tonight as we had planned, I can fix you something. There's plenty of meat and stuff in the freezer." Her eyes waited to an answer, a smile, a nod, but he made no sign. "Anyway," she went on, "I'll get you some bread and cheese." "I don't want it," he said. She moved uneasily in her chair. "But you have to have supper. I can easily fix you something. I'd like to do it. We can have lamb, anything you want. Everything's in the freezer." "Forget it," he said. "But darling, you have to eat it. I'll do it anyway, and then you can have it or not, as you like." She stood up and placed her sewing on the table by the lamp. "Sit down," he said. "Just for a minute, sit down." He sounded very harsh. He was being harsh, strange, and mysterious all night. It wasn't until then that she began to get frightened. Okay, so stop and jot. How is Roald Dahl, our author, creating suspense in the rising action? Think of strategies that authors use to teach their reader something. So think as an inner dialogue, character reactions, repetition, dialogue, character interactions, details about the setting, etc. What is our author doing in this rising action so far? To create suspense. Where am I? Sorry. To build suspense in the rising action. Stop and jot, then unpause. Okay, welcome back. Again, you should have all these stop and jots filled out. I am collecting this today. So if I see that you've been going through the video but not completing stop and jots, that is going to earn you a lunch detention. If you haven't filled them out at every pause, do that now. If not, follow along with She Lowered. She lowered herself into the chair, watching him all the time with large, puzzled eyes. He had finished his second drink and was staring into the glass. "Listen," he said, "I've got something to tell you." "What is it, darling? What's the matter?" So stop and jot. Make a prediction. What is Mary's husband going to tell her? Support your answer with evidence from the rising action. So again, little details like don't say something kind of crazy here, like, "Oh, he's probably going to tell her that he's going to kill her." Like, don't think so dramatic. Really go back through this rising action. Are there any hints and clues that our author is giving us that tell us what her husband is about to tell her? Jot that down. Unpause, and make sure for support your answer with evidence that you say, "I know this because in the text it says," and then give your evidence. Okay, welcome back. I just want to make sure that you double check your answer right now. This should also have evidence from the text. You should make sure it says, "I think this because in the text it says," and there's some evidence in quotation marks. Let's keep going. He became absolutely motionless and he kept his head down. "This is going to be a big shock to you, I'm afraid," he said. "But I've thought about it a good deal, and I've decided that the only thing to do is tell you immediately." And he told her. It didn't take long, 4 to 5 minutes at most, and she sat still through it all, watching him with puzzled horror. And I know it's a tough time to be telling you this, but there simply wasn't any other way. Of course, I'll give you money and see that you're taken care of, but there really shouldn't be any problem. I hope not, in any case. It wouldn't be very good for my job. So pause right here and stop and jot. What do you infer that he told her? Because there was like a pause moment where it doesn't actually tell us what he said. So finish that out. Okay, welcome back. Here's what you are now going to do on your own. Read these last 4 paragraphs, read them very carefully, and then flip, complete your exit ticket, Make sure you do all the parts. And then you are going to continue writing